Alright you guys, what's happening? Welcome back to another matchday reaction video. This time we're talking Celtic 0, Aberdeen 0 from Celtic Park today. A game that was quite interesting, but in all honesty, a game that lacked real quality from both sides. We will try and talk about the interesting stuff, but definitely highlight the lack of quality on display for both teams. A really, really good point for Aberdeen. Potentially we could have nicked all three in the second half the way we played at times, but I think it would have been incredibly harsh if we had. The first thing to say about the team today, we were missing Niall McGinn, who, to be honest, hasn't been starting a lot recently, but more importantly, we were missing Gary Mackay-Steven, which could have impacted our width a wee bit. We started with Conor McLennan on the left, Greg Stewart on the right, and to be honest, we played that for almost the entirety of the game. And to be fair, both guys had their moments, particularly Greg Stewart I thought was very good on the ball, but the big thing about us was that we were playing with James Wilson behind Sam Cosgrove. Now, Wilson really didn't look comfortable doing that, and as a result, didn't really get himself into the game. What was frustrating as well was that Wilson really wasn't making any runs off Cosgrove, so when we were putting balls forward for Cosgrove to win in the air, he was doing a pretty good job, but nobody was anticipating his flick on, so that was a wee bit frustrating. Overall, in the first half today, I thought for 25 minutes, there was really nothing happening. Celtic weren't a threat, and we were retaining the ball so poorly in that first half. Last 20 minutes, to be honest, was I think the best period for Celtic, where we were really hanging on, although to be honest, they didn't create a huge amount. They had a shot for the edge of the box that was tipped wide. They had a Boyata header for a corner that went over the bar. And then they had a goal disallowed right before half-time. Now, obviously, where the away fans are, we were kind of in line with it. And when the ball comes in, you can see that I think it was Ayer who got the header and Scott Brown behind him are both at least a yard offside. But that was a let off for us because we, towards the end of that half, were really not defending their set piece as well. They were doing the same routine as well for corners where they were just putting in low deliveries and we weren't getting to the front post and clearing them, so they kept trying them and we ended up having to scramble them away, which was a wee bit frustrating. We didn't really create anything of note in the first half. Going forward, we were so poor on the ball, but we defended well, we were organised, and for the most part I thought we really limited Celtic, which was really pleasing in that first half. Second half, we came out and I don't know what happened in the first 20 minutes of the half, but we played very, very well. We knocked the ball around well. We created a few decent openings, but we were actually very, very poor when it came to that final chance. And I think we only really tested Bain once, and even then it was a Dom ball shot right at him. So even in that first 20 minutes of the second half where I thought we were the better side, I really didn't think that we created anything of note. And by the same token, they had probably their best chance of the game with Edward one-on-one with Lewis. Lewis has made a good save. So even in that period where I thought we were the better side, they had the best chance. What really helped catapult us in that second half was I thought we would hook Wilson for Stevie May and we would just play the same formation. But what we actually did was we hooked James Wilson and brought on Dean Campbell. And Dean Campbell had a really, really good game in centre midfield when he came on. And he was playing deeper than Stevie May would have, but it really helped us take control of the midfield for those 20 minutes or so, where we were able to have a kind of pop at Celtic and try and make something happen. We had a few decent crosses into the box with no takers. We had a few times where Conor McLennan was cutting in for the left and just taking too long to get the shot away, trying to create the perfect opportunity without taking what was in front of him, and we never really created anything. Last 20 minutes of the game, we were kind of hanging on in a way, but I didn't think Celtic were particularly dangerous in that last 20 minutes. There was a cross to the back post where Timothy Weah just didn't get there. There was a couple of other opportunities where they were getting good space in the box but no really getting a shot away. And I think there was one actually with Mikey Johnson where after he came on, he scooped one over the bar when he probably should have hit the target. But I thought overall probably a deserved point for Aberdeen. I certainly thought defensively we were really good, and I thought going forward, as much as we didn't offer anything in that first half, we did some bits and bobs in the second half that we can take some positives from. I think Celtic, if we're being realistic, have definitely improved defensively this season. When you look at their back four of the day, Kieran Tierney's the best left back in the country by an absolute mile. That Toyan that they've brought in on loan looks a decent player. Ayer, granted Ayer lost a lot of aerial battles with Cosgrove today, but Ayer's a very tidy centre half, and I actually thought Boyata was their best player. The problem for Celtic going forward today was there was too many passengers. They were missing Callum McGregor today, which made a bit of a difference, and I think that Scott Sinclair was just anonymous in the first half. We'll get to why in a bit. I thought that they were just kind of pedestrian going forward, and they did hook Scott Sinclair at halftime. They hooked Ewan Henderson as well and brought on Edward and I think it was Mikey Johnson then. But the changes at halftime really suited us because they made the changes based on what we were doing, whereas we made the changes and changed our shape, and that really suited us going into that second half. And Celtic didn't really adjust until we started sitting deep. And I think our game plan for today was really when they had the ball, we were quite happy to let them wander forward to about 10 yards inside their own half, and then we started pressing them. So that kind of worked well for us today. We weren't bothered when Boyata picked up the ball 20-25 yards for his own goal and just kind of strolled forward inside their half. We were quite happy to let him do that. But we stayed organised, and once they got to within 40 yards of goal, that was when we started pressing them and making it difficult for them. And they really didn't get going the day. They never really hit a rhythm. I'm really happy with the performance today, and we'll go through the team in a moment. For Celtic, the one other guy, and I know Aberdeen fans will fucking hate this, but the one other guy I think that comes in for a lot of credit today was Scott Brown for Celtic. I thought he was really, really good today. He wasted one pass in the second half, but other than that, he was very, very good. And I think if we're being honest, if you look at that sort of head-to-head battle between Shinnie and Scott Brown, Brown won that today. I didn't think Shinnie played that well today, but we'll go through the rest of the team just now. Joe Lewis didn't have a lot of saves to make. Made one very good one for Edward, though. I kind of worry sometimes about Max Lowe defensively, but there's been two very, very good performances for Max Lowe at left-back against Celtic. The Cup final and then this one, I thought he was really, really good. Scott McKenna and Andy Considine, I still never trust Considine, but they worked so well together. I thought Scott McKenna was immense today. But I actually thought our best player was Dominic Ball at right back. And genuinely, like, we were scared about Dominic Ball having to play right back after Logan got injured. But so far, it's only a handful of games. But Dom Ball's been a much better right back this season than Shea Logan. Shea Logan's no been great this season. And Dom Ball, since he came into right back to cover Logan's injury, has been terrific. He was brilliant at St Johnstone. He had a good game on Sunday last week against Rangers. And he had a smashing game today. He was so good today. He kept Sinclair really, really quiet in that first half. And I was kind of worried about that, doing that flank where they had Sinclair with Tierney coming on the overlap, and we had Dom Ball and Greg Stewart having to deal with it. But they both dealt with it incredibly well, so I was really happy with that. Midfield, like I said, I didn't really think Shinnie had a great game today. He had his moments in the first half, but in the second half, I kind of felt like Shinnie was a wee bit of a passenger of the day, which was surprising. Lewis Ferguson, on the other hand, had a really, really good game in centre midfield. I thought he was excellent. I thought he was very, very good with the ball. I thought he was composed, and he really was doing a good job specifically in that second half of dictating the tempo and playing at our speed, which is not something we do often at Celtic Park. In those first 20 minutes of the second half, I thought Lewis Ferguson was dictating the pace, and I was really, really happy with that. Campbell had a good game when he came on, a much better game than Wilson, who really wasn't in the game. Greg Stewart, as always, had a lot of touches. Not a huge end product for Greg Stewart today, but he was decent going forward. Conor McLennan was so frustrating today for two reasons. One, like I mentioned earlier, there was a couple of times coming forward where he had a chance to get shots away and didn't he? And the other thing that really frustrated me was when Sam Cosgrove got really isolated, McLennan was reacting rather than anticipating. So every time Cosgrove jumped with Boyata, there was a decent battle there. But every time Cosgrove jumped with Ayer, Cosgrove won the ball. And instead of like gambling on a run, McLennan was standing watching. And then when Cosgrove wins the header, he's making a run towards the ball and he's never getting there. And that was really, really annoying. I was hoping that once it became clear that Cosgrove was winning the aerial battle with Ayer, that McLennan was just going to gamble on some runs and hope for a flick on. But never really worked today, and that was kind of frustrating. I really like Conor McLennan, and I think he's a good player. I've talked a wee bit about his indecisiveness on the ball, which he kind of had today. But yeah, his anticipation of what was going to happen when the ball was going forward to Cosgrove was really frustrating. Especially the amount of times he was the closest player to him and he was just standing still. That really, really frustrated me. But overall, like I say, a very, very good defensive performance for Aberdeen today. We will very rarely have a more comfortable afternoon there. Obviously, they did have chances, but I've spoken to a few Celtic fans today who thought the draw was the right result. And I'll be honest, I don't think either team deserved to score today. So 0-0 was absolutely the right result. I think as well today, considering that it's 3 days before we have to go back to Glasgow, the tempo of the game today probably winning knacker us out, which is actually quite pleasing. Quite often when you come to Celtic Park, Celtic play at such a high tempo and you're chasing the ball, but that didn't really happen today, so hopefully that'll stand us in good stead for Tuesday night, and hopefully we'll get Gary Mackay-Steven at least on the bench. McInnes said in his interview after the game came a wee bit too quick for him the day and he couldn't be on the bench, but hopefully we'll get some involvement for GMS, because we need guys who are going to run at them. And if we can have that situation where we have Greg Stewart playing behind a striker, Cosgrove's going to be suspended, so it'll probably be Wilson. We have Mackay-Steven on one wing and Conor McLennan on the other. That's our best opportunity to score goals against Rangers on Tuesday. Two guys that are willing to run at them. Greg Stewart's a really good footballer, and he scored a perler at Ibrox earlier in the season for Kilmarnock. Obviously, it's disappointing to be missing Cosgrove, but hopefully we'll see someone out of James Wilson if he's the man who starts on Tuesday. But we'll worry about Tuesday when it comes. Thank you very much for watching today. If you've enjoyed, hit that red subscribe button. It helps me out massively. Like the video as well, because it helps get it out there. And if you know anybody who'd enjoy, share it with them. I've been QMJ. It's fucking midnight, so I'm going to bed, but I'll talk to you again sometime.